The following half-hour show is a paid political program and is not endorsed by this station, management, or staff.
The following program is sponsored by Excalibur Insurance Management Services.
This week we welcome another national figure to the Volpe Report, former Pennsylvania United States Senator Rick Santorum. Some United States senators rise to the ranks of national leader, and Rick Santorum is surely in that group. Senator Santorum's political career began as a big underdog when he pulled off a huge upset by beating United States Congressman Doug Walgren, who had been a 7-term incumbent at the time. After a couple of terms in the United States House of Representatives, Santorum undertook another Herculean challenge by taking on Democratic United States Senator Harris Wofford. Wofford had become a senator by appointment of then-Governor Robert P. Casey to fill the vacancy created by the tragic death of Republican United States Senator John Hines, who had died in a plane crash. The special election was scheduled the following November to complete the full unexpired term of Hines, and Wofford squared off against United States Attorney General and former 2-term Republican governor of Pennsylvania, Dick Thornburgh. In a shocking upset, Wofford defeated Thornburgh in 1991. This set up the 1994 election between Democratic United States Senator Wofford and then Republican United States Congressman Rick Santorum. Santorum went on to a shocking victory to become a United States Senator and won re-election in 2000 to a second term. After 12 years in the Senate, Santorum was bested by Robert P. Casey, Jr. in 2006. Casey is currently still our United States Senator. After his Senate loss, Santorum returned to his law career, as well as becoming a political contributor to the Fox National News broadcast. He also wrote regular op-ed opinion pieces for the Philadelphia Inquirer. In 2012, Senator Santorum undertook another monumental challenge as he announced his bid for the Republican nomination for President of the United States. Santorum went from long shot to frontrunner when he shocked the country by winning the Iowa caucuses, significantly outpolling eventual Republican nominee Mitt Romney. Santorum then followed that up with victories in Colorado and Minnesota, as well as Missouri. On Super Tuesday, Santorum won North Dakota, Oklahoma, and Tennessee, and barely lost to Romney in Ohio. A week later, he posted victories in Alabama and Mississippi. As the campaign season drew to a close, knowing he could not secure enough delegates to win the nomination, he withdrew, handing the nomination to Mitt Romney. Romney, of course, would go on as the Republican nominee for president, eventually losing to President Barack Obama, who won re-election to a second term. Santorum would go on to become a political contributor with CNN for a number of years. A little bit about Rick's background. He earned his bachelor's degree from Pennsylvania State University and then went on to the University of Pittsburgh and achieved his MBA. Rick worked as a legislative assistant to Pennsylvania Senator J. Doyle Corman, while at the same time attending Dickinson School of Law. He then earned a Juris Doctorate. Upon being admitted to the Pennsylvania bar as a lawyer, he worked for one of the top law firms in Pittsburgh, Kirkpatrick Lockhart. On today's show, we will discuss his view of the upcoming presidential election in 2024, as well as his take of the dangerous precedent of the 34 felony count of indictments against former President Donald Trump. We'll also talk about Biden's failed policies, as Rick is a strong advocate that a change is needed in this country. This will be a 2-part show, as Senator Santorum returns next week as well, but next week he'll be joined by special guest Mark Meckler, who is currently president of the Convention of States movement, as well as the former national founder of the Tea Party movement, which helped define the Republican Party for more than a decade.
This is the Volpe Report, a weekly news and political interview show examining the latest local, state, and national issues with Chuck Volpe. Insightful, informative, controversial, the area's premier political talk show, the Volpe Report.
Senator, welcome to the Volpe Report.
Oh, it's always great to be back with you. It's been a while since I've been on the show. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, thanks, Rick. As we talked quickly off camera for my audience's benefit, you were one of the first speakers in a public affairs forum in honor of my deceased dad. We created a full tuition scholarship at the university. The inaugural speaker was then Governor Robert P. Casey that launched it. And I'm going to say within a year or two after that, you were kind enough, as then a sitting incumbent United States Senator from Pennsylvania, to come up and do that forum. You gave a discussion to the university. Most of their political science and public administration departments attended it in that theater that we had it in. But I remember back then, I'm dating both of us, Senator, but almost 25 years ago that took place.
We both had darker hair.
There's no question about it. But at any rate, thank you for your time. And I want to get into something I do with guests in a sense that our media market covers about, well, all of Northeast and Central Pennsylvania, give or take 4 million people in our viewing market. But I'm sure many of them, of the older ones, remember your time as United States Senator. You served 2 terms. But it's been a while. And they will also remember, and we'll get to your presidential run. And it was a big one and an impactful one in 2012. But that's now 11 years ago. So they caught you on CNN as you were a guest contributor for years on that. But for those of you that haven't caught up, kind of tell us what you're doing now.
Well, I've sort of stayed engaged. I worked at CNN for a while. That came to an end right around the time CNN sort of crashed and burned, if you will, with all the changes. And then I started working. I've been working for Newsmax since then, and doing their senior political analyst. So you can catch me there. But I've also been working in the private sector. I ran a movie company for a while. Ran a movie company for 3 or 4 years, and after that, have been working in 2 areas that are taking up a lot of my time right now. One is in the blood plasma space. Believe it or not, a friend of mine and I are working with some large manufacturers who take blood plasma. The plasma centers you see around that people go and donate their blood, donate their plasma. They make those into proteins. And it's near and dear to my heart because my daughter, Bella, who's going to be 15 this year, she gets an infusion every week because she is primary immune deficient. And so there's a shortage of plasma products, and particularly IG, immune globulin. And a friend of mine came to me and said, I've got a better idea on how we can get more product in the market. And over the last 7, 8 years, I've been working to get that. And we're real close to going to market, and we're real excited about it. So I'm involved with that. I'm in the waste energy business, believe it or not. That's another business. And there I'm involved in Central Europe. In fact, I take trips over there on a regular basis and work to try to, make the environment cleaner and greener. So I'm doing a lot of fun things.
In your political career that I remember well, I mean, I was running for governor a long time ago, living in Pittsburgh, and that Democratic in '94, and that was the election year. And I, of course, followed your career. And I don't know if people, a lot, unless you're politically active, wouldn't remember, when you beat 7-term incumbent Doug Walgren, that was like a shocking upset in that district. And of course, served a couple terms. And then you took on Harris Wofford, who was riding high. He had beaten the venerable Dick Thornburgh, former governor, in '91 for that when tragically Senator John Hines died to fill that seat. And of course, you were a prohibitive underdog in that race, and again, shocked the country again winning that race. And as we'll talk more a little later about your presidential adventure, you kind of came out of the dark there, won the Iowa caucuses, and were this close to becoming the Republican nominee for United States president. In all those races, you were prohibitive underdog, and you almost even became president of the United States. So talk a little bit about your political will, if you will.
Well, one of the things that my dad taught me, my dad was an immigrant from Italy to this country, and he said, dream big, work hard, and you'd be amazed how this country will bless you. And the other thing he taught me is don't be afraid of taking risks and losing. That this is how you really grow in your life, not by the victories you have, but by the losses you have. And that's how you learn about yourself, and you make yourself a better person from having experienced loss. And if there's one thing that everybody in America has in common, we all experience loss. We don't always win at everything we do, and that's a commonality. And And I think it does make us stronger. And I've never been afraid of losing. I've never been afraid of taking big chances, and never afraid of people, saying nasty things about me because I have no chance. I just felt like, you ran, you had a long shot race, and you came up short. I had a long shot race for a couple of times, and I came up short too. But they made me, to me, they were great experiences for me. I think they made a difference in many respects for the country, particularly my 2012 race when, I ran on the issue of manufacturing and made in America, really America first, if you want to say it. I didn't use those terms. Trump's a better marketer than I am, but the campaign that I ran in 12 really was the mirror campaign that Trump ended up running in 16, and I think it's really helped change the landscape, political landscape of the country for the better.
Agree. And the historical parallel, I'm glad you mentioned that, to me is clear. You did run almost the same race in 2012, and the country may not have been quite ready for hearing it for the first time. It proved a winner for Donald Trump in 2016. That reminds me, and you know political history as well as I do, Barry Goldwater in 64, talking about conservative values, ultimately produced, well, first Richard Nixon and ultimately the Reagan Revolution. Even he gave credit to Barry Goldwater. The country wasn't quite ready at that point to hear these things and then pull the lever, but they were. Somebody had to lay that foundation. You really did that in 2012 for 2016.
Well, it's really interesting. You don't expect Donald Trump to give credit to anybody for something that he did. So
well, you've been somewhat critical of him on CNN on a number of issues, so there's no doubt he won't give you credit.
No, he's not going to give me credit. But the true story, I was promoting my book back in 2014. I wrote this book after the 2012 race called Blue Collar Conservatives, and laid out a template for how I ran and how I thought Republicans could win states like Michigan and Wisconsin and Ohio and Pennsylvania. And Trump happened to hear me on Joe Piscopo's radio show up in New York, got in touch with me and said, come and see me. So I went up to see him. This was the summer of 2014. And I walked into his office, and he's sitting behind his desk, and he's holding a copy of my book.
Wow.
And he said, I read your book. And I said, yeah, you didn't read my book. And he said, no, I read your book. Great book. And I said, yeah, the hell you read my book. And he said, no, I read anyway. He said, yeah, right. He said, someone needs to run for president on this book. And he started talking about, manufacturing and construction and energy and the border that I talked about, trade and China, all those things that I went through. And I said, was sort of the hallmark of my campaign. He said, and then he told me he was thinking of running for president. And he spent the next 45 minutes telling me why his life was better without being president. So I walked out thinking he wasn't going to run, but obviously he did. And I give him credit. He did a better job of selling the message than I did. And candidly, he did a great job in following through with a lot.
Great. And just for our audience's benefit, I have to go to the glasses. I don't know if you watch my favorite show, pardon the interruption, Tony Kornheiser and Michael Wilbon, but Kornheiser always goes to the glasses. My eyesight isn't what it used to be, Senator, 20-some years ago. But I want it for our audience's benefit. I already mentioned you won the Iowa caucuses. But then on Super Tuesday of that year, you go on to win North Dakota, Oklahoma, and Tennessee. Then you would later lose in a photo finish within 1% in Ohio, and then went on to win Alabama and Mississippi. So you literally won 10 to 12, whatever states it was you won. So you were right there for the Republican nomination for U.S. president. So, which segues, the reason I bring all that up is, who better than you as an expert to talk about what we'll call the horse race, the jockeying for position for the 2024 Republican nomination for president to challenge the awful and regressive policies of President Joe Biden. The Democrat radical progressives, and he, as their titular leader, have destroyed our energy production, have hurt our national presence defense posture. If not for their tepid energy policy, you don't get the Ukraine invasion, I believe, because Putin set it up nicely. When we were shutting down all our oil and gas production in Marcellus Shale, things our European allies needed, they were forced to go to Putin so their citizens didn't freeze, which emboldened him to cross the border. So, of course, our immigration policy is a catastrophe at the border. So, okay, so we need a Republican nominee that can win. I have grave doubts as to whether President Trump, who's the first announced, can win. We have Ron DeSantis, we have Chris Christie, we have Mike Pompeo, we have a number of Mike Pence that are running. So I'd like your overview of what you see happening and really talk about what I believe is the danger of Trump becoming the nominee. I don't think he can win, Senator, but your take.
Well, I think you're right. If you look at any candidate, one of the things you want out of a candidate is someone that unites your team and divides their team. Because if your team's united and their team's divided, you have a pretty good chance of winning. Trump has proven over several election cycles now that he unites their team in record numbers, and he does, in fact, divide our team. Now you can say, well, he divides us 90-10. It doesn't take much to lose a general election. I mean, you lose 10% of your base. Democrats lose 10% of their base. You're going to have a hard time winning an election. And that's what really Trump is. And I look at it as he's done a tremendous job in transforming the party. We talked about that earlier. He did a great job as president and as far as a lot of the policies, but he lost re-election to a guy who never left his basement and is clearly not. I mean, I served with Joe Biden for 12 years. Joe Biden is a shell of the person he was, and he still lost to him, not because Joe Biden was a good candidate. He wasn't. He's a terrible candidate, but because it was Donald Trump. The race was either you were for Trump or against Trump. Biden had nothing to do with it. And it's hard to, when you're running against an incumbent like Joe Biden, you want the race to be about his record. You don't want it to be about your candidate. You want it to be a referendum on the president. Agreed. That's how Biden won in 2020. He won because it was a referendum on Donald Trump. Well, with Biden, you laid out the record. It's a terrible record. And any good, decent candidate should be able to win with Biden being the centerpiece of the campaign, but he won't be if Trump's the nominee. Trump will be the centerpiece. So, look, if Donald Trump's the nominee, I'll support him and I'll do whatever I can to get him elected. But I'm very, very concerned that with Trump on the top of the ticket, we're going to have Republicans should be having a very good election year. And I think with Trump at the top of the ticket, that will not be the case.
Right. The person to me that holds the most promise, like a new shiny car coming out of the showroom, is Ron DeSantis in Florida. His massive re-election win. But Rick, especially if you look in deep blue areas like Dade County, the Miami area, they're 4-1 Democrat. He won those. He would appear to be, in terms of his courage on tough stances, whether you want to talk about abortion or teaching gender ideology to third graders, those kind of, teaching critical race theory to grade schoolers. He has taken on those. He took on Disney, which took a lot of cojones. So he kind of represents, he's the intellectual, the Harvard Law, as well as a military background. He touches a lot of bases. I like your thoughts on Ron DeSantis.
I think he's clearly the other. I don't know if he's an 800-pound gorilla, but maybe he's 400 or 500-pound gorilla. I mean, he's certainly the other major player in the race. There's no question. There's when it comes to running for president, the most important thing is how much money can you raise and can you continue your race? And as long as he's the front runner against Trump, he'll be able to raise money. The question is, is he going to connect with voters and show some momentum at some point? We'll wait and see. I mean, there's other good candidates out there. I mean, Tim Scott's a good candidate. He has a great personal story. He's a good friend. He's someone who I think could catch fire in a state like New Hampshire or Iowa, where you're meeting voters one-on-one. It's going to be hard for DeSantis. We'll wait and see how he does, but it's going to be hard for DeSantis to do that. I mean, to be governor of Florida and yet go out and do the grassroots work and get to a bunch of different counties in Iowa and New Hampshire and those voters in the early states, matters a lot to shake their hand and look them in the eye and talk to them and answer their questions at town halls. And we'll just wait and see whether that's the kind of campaign that DeSantis decides to run, or if he's going to create an opening for a Scott or a Nikki Haley or a Mike Pence or somebody like that to come in.
Sure. Well, that's a tremendous overview and kind of is a good segue point to go back to President Trump. on his 34-count felony indictment up in New York by DA Alvin Bragg. I just did a show with a former United States Attorney, federal prosecutor, Bill McSwain, that I know you know.
Yeah.
Just ran
Sure.
a very, very strong campaign for governor. Would be a prohibitive favorite. I think he will run. He's told me that. He's considering it, but I think he is going to run for Attorney General of Pennsylvania. But he had a good perspective and objectivity, because while Trump appointed him to be a United States Attorney in the Eastern District, Trump was also the one, along with what he did to his other ally, Congressman Lou Barletta, in that race to produce Doug Mastriano. I believe he hurt Pennsylvania, meaning Donald Trump, badly. If we had a better gubernatorial candidate, if we had Dave McCormick in that U.S. Senate race, I think Dave McCormick wins. And he really changed the outcome of those races by who he endorsed. But at any rate, my thought on that is, and I talked to Bill McSwain about that, he talked about the assault on the rule of law. And as fellow attorneys, I had posited to Bill McSwain on the last show that I thought the furies were unleashed and Pandora's box open. The thing that always, to me, separated America, of course, the Fourth Estate and a free press, the ability to speak freely, the First Amendment freedom of speech, separated us from other third world countries and authoritarian countries like Russia and China. Once we start putting political enemies in jail to silence them, how are we any different than Russia and China? So I'd like your comment on that, because you also are an attorney.
I think you said it very, very well. This has been a weaponization of the criminal justice system by political appointees and elected officials. This you're right. It's the banana republic stuff, isn't that Russia? This is what third world countries do, is to throw recently defeated or deposed people in jail. And this is a ridiculous. It's not even an indictment. Didn't even indict him on any federal crime. I mean, it's just it's pathetic, but it's what the left does these days. They believe that they can't. I really believe they don't think they can win against a good, strong conservative candidate. So what they do is they go out and prepare the battlefield by spending money in Republican primaries or doing things like this with Republican primary candidates to lift them up among Republicans. As you know, Josh Shapiro spent a couple $1 million campaigning for Doug Mastriano, trying to get him elected in the primary. And that's what this is. This is trying to get Donald Trump to be the nominee of the Republican Party, and it's working. His numbers have gone through the roof since this has happened. And the Democrats know this. They know that Republicans will rally around the flag, if you will, rally around their man and say, how horrible this is. Well, don't be so predictable, is what I would say to my conservative and Republican colleagues. They want Donald Trump because they think Donald Trump is the most beatable. Now, maybe he won't be. I don't know. But you and I, who've been looking at this for a long time, see the wisdom of what they're doing. But it is just power hungry. It's ugly. It's corrupt. And I understand they think that they being in power is the most important thing, and they'll use any means necessary to do it. But this is undermining the rule of law. This is undermining societal norms and political norms, and it's all going to come back to bite him. Just like changing the votes on judges to make it a simple majority came back and burned them. You start playing around with things that have been put in place for a long time to make sure that the country runs on a more stable and civil way. You start tearing those things down. It comes back to bite you, and it hurts the country overall.
And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, especially with your 2 terms as a United States Senator, their attempt, again, so short-sighted, to get rid of the filibuster so they can ram down the throats of the American people. They didn't even have the 1 vote they needed in the Senate body. They had to have the vice president break the tie. They wanted to federalize elections and encroach more and more with an omnipotent federal government in everybody's lives, something the framers were adamantly against. And thank God for Senators Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin seeing, as Democrats, the danger that you've talked about, standing their ground and not allowing it. But to your point, Senator, they were willing to do that, and we both know as soon as the Republicans got back, like, be careful what you beg for, wish for, they would have undone all of those laws and passed a whole nother bunch of really far-right laws that the liberals hate, and we go down in this cycle right down the drain.
No, you're absolutely right. The whole point of the United States Senate was, as Thomas Jefferson said, it's the saucer you pour hot tea in to cool before you drink it. And look, America's democracies, republics are very much mob rule. Sometimes you look at revolutionary France, you look at some other countries that have been democracies or republics. If there are no barriers to calm the passions of the moment, then you have exactly what you said. You just have this pendulum swinging back and forth, and more radically as time goes on. I understand people they want change, they want things to happen, but you know what? America's a pretty great country. I don't think it needs overwhelming change. I think what it needs is to measurably respond to the problems that we have, and do so within the confines of building consensus. And what the left is really focused on is this sort of majoritarian mob rule, and we get what we want, and then we shut everybody up and don't let them fight back. And you're seeing this with a lot of this wokeism that's I'm sure it's happening at the U as it is everywhere else, where conservatives aren't even allowed to talk. You're not even allowed to say anything. You can't even hold positions. This is the problem with the left, which is one used to the old saying, one man, one vote, one time. And you get your way, and then you shut everybody up, and you don't let them say anything in the future. That's the danger that we're seeing with this movement.
This concludes part one. We'll be back next week to discuss the progressive Democrats' wish for a pervasive and omnipotent federal government. We've seen this from the Biden administration, as well as the Senate attempts to allow President Biden to federalize our elections and pack the United States Supreme Court. In Biden's first year in the presidency, federal departments and agencies created $200 billion more in regulatory costs on American businesses than under the previous year under Donald Trump. In fact, the additional regulatory costs were more than the entire first term of former Democratic President Barack Obama. Next week, we will discuss these matters as Senator Santorum returns for part two. And we will be joined by another special guest, as aforementioned, Mark Meckler. Mr. Meckler is the president and co-founder of Convention of States, a national movement seeking to call the first ever Article 5 Convention of States. Article 5 is part of the United States Constitution. This is not Mark's first political affiliation. In 2009, he co-founded the Tea Party Patriots, the largest Tea Party group in the United States. As a result of Mark's leadership, the Tea Party grew to a massive national movement, electing numerous members to the United States Congress. Mark left the Tea Party in 2012 when he found that many of the politicians he helped elect were unwilling to keep their campaign promises to drain the swamp in Washington. After leaving the Tea Party, Mark founded the Citizens for Self-Governance and started a class action lawsuit against the Internal Revenue Service for unlawfully targeting Tea Party groups. He won that lawsuit and was the only successful class action lawsuit against the IRS, making targeted victims whole. Under Mark's leadership in Convention of States, the Article 5 resolution has already been ratified in 15 states. They've called for a convention. It takes 34 total states for the convention to begin. In addition to running Convention of States, he is also the interim CEO of Parler, a social media company. Mark received his Bachelor of Arts in English from San Diego State University, and then went on to the McGeorge School of Law at Pacific University, earning his Juris Doctorate degree. We look forward to next week's show with two special guests.